Oh, good morning, good morning, good morning, you fine people. Welcome to another episode of the Knicks Morning Brew. I'm your guy, Hector. And like always, I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Philly Porto. Philly, good morning.
Good morning, my man. It was a hard night. It was a late night.
Hmm.
I put the kids to bed, put the wife to bed, stayed up to be faithful to my New York Knicks. Unfortunately, they were not faithful to me. So we will be discussing heartbreak, trades,
Mm.
future of this team, and others, and kicking it with the one and only Brett Siegel. So lock in, grab your coffee, or if you're Brett, don't grab your coffee and get ready for another episode of the Knicks Morning Brew.
And let's drop the intro. And good morning, good morning, good morning. KOD Universe, stand up. All you Knick fans, stand up. And you Degens, wake up and get your coffee. Like I said, welcome to another episode of the Knicks Morning Brew. I am your guy, Hector, chilling with my brother, Philly Porto, on this fine, beautiful Friday morning. Philip, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it's you oh yo, your girl was in the Heights. So
Yes.
as soon as you said good morning, like my mind
Yeah.
automatically went to good morning, Usnavi. If
Yeah.
you've never seen In the Heights, y'all need to see that. That's my jam. I can't sing for the
Yes,
lick, but
yes. And
that
when
song
you
will
go,
make me
when you're
feel like I
watching the
can.
movie, pay attention to the cab scene because my girl, she is the cab lady that says you're thirsty. But Philip, like always, you're thirsty. I'm thirsty. We
I
are
am
here this
thirsty.
morning. We got a special guest to join us. Phil, introduce this guest before I bring him up.
Yeah, so at this point, we got to call him a biffle. Like if we're like a little girl in high school, this is our biffle. This is the second time we've had him. We had him before all the trades went down,
Hmm.
and we got to hear some of his predictions and some of his thoughts of what we thought we would or wouldn't see in a time where so many people were like, "We're gonna get Kuzma." He was like, "Y'all ain't gonna get Kuzma," and he was right. We didn't get Kuzma. So it's good to have him back now that all that dust has kind of settled. Get
Hmm.
his thoughts from like a professional standpoint on where he
Yes.
thinks teams landed, because we can all be like, yeah, teams were thinking of this the whole time, but this is the guy that's a little more insightful to be able to say, nope, they
Hmm.
lucked out on that, or yeah, they banked on that from the get go. So we're gonna
Yes.
bring up Brett Siegel, friend to the channel, second time on, and let's just kind of like hang out and get to know some of his thoughts.
Let's go, Mr. Brett. Good morning, brother.
Good morning. Thank you guys for having me.
Of course, of course. And like Phil was saying last time you was on and we was talking about the trade deadline and different possibilities of different scenarios, it was very, expectations was very low. But right after you was on for that episode, it's like Thanos came with the Infinity Gauntlet and started snapping because Kyrie was traded, KD was traded. There was just a massive trade deadline. When you look back on it, reflection on the trade deadline, what was your thoughts on it, Brett?
Yeah, it was crazy because, like you mentioned, you saw Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving traded within that week span, and we saw a bunch of other subsequent moves made. I mean, even the outgoing contracts of Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, and Cam Johnson to the Brooklyn Nets. That's a big deal. Those are two good players that the Nets now have. They flipped Crowder for some draft picks. You had the Warriors giving up James Wiseman to get Gary Payton, and everything that happened there with that trade being in jeopardy, with Payton failing his physical and now his status being uncertain. So, I mean, there was just a lot of moving pieces at this trade deadline, and there were a lot of contending teams that tried to go all in. Like we mentioned, the Mavericks trying to go all in by getting Kyrie Irving to pair with Luka Doncic, Kevin Durant going to the Suns. So the West got even stronger, and the East, it really seems like that you have those two top teams in the Celtics and the Bucks, and then you have a couple middle tier teams that could make some noise as well.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, like when we were talking, we were like, waiting for the shoe to drop. In our episode, we were like, what is the trade that's going to just domino affect everything? And then that KD Kyrie situation, all that started to happen. And the more I sit back and look at it, and I'm like, man, as much as people think that the Nets got a raw deal, by having to trade their stars, when you kind of look at it, that wasn't working at all. Like, it just wasn't. Like, that duo, they weren't playing a ton of games together. Like, there was always drama with the front office and, Kyrie Irving. So it's like, yes, they might not have what were considered top tier stars anymore, but they got contracts of players that are on the rise, players that are like continuing to prove that they are going to be great players for a long time. So it might actually be, if those players stay, something that it's a great foundation to build upon. We were talking in one of our last episodes with Breeze that it looks like some teams are starting to say this whole idea of building around only one or two superstars is not really working. Look how quickly a player can demand a trade and say, I'm not going to play unless you trade me. Look how quickly one of these guys, like a Zion Williamson, can get injured and not be able to play. And we've revolved everything around these one or two guys. And so I feel like what the Knicks are doing and what, you see some of these other teams doing, such as the Jazz and, just other teams are starting to say, how many really good players can we get, and not worry about just putting all of our eggs in one or two baskets. And for some teams it's working, for some teams it's not. But I think for us it worked, with the Josh Hart acquisition. I felt like that was a really good, pickup for us. What do you think was, because the Kyrie thing kind of still has a question mark, like we have not seen if this is going to work. It's either going to pick up and surprise everybody, or it's going to fall flat on its face. What do you think was the best trade for a team coming out of that whole trade deadline?
It's tough because there were quite a few that you look at and you're like, that was a good deal for them. And you mentioned the Nets getting those pieces back for Kevin Durant. Obviously, getting rid of Durant is a big deal, and you never want to get rid of a player like that, because anytime he's on the floor, you have a chance to not only win games but compete for a championship with him alone. But you give him up, you bring in Mikal Bridges, who's looked like a young star that's blossoming in Brooklyn. Cameron Johnson has seen a bigger role, and he's really played well. And he's had multiple 20-point games so far for the Nets. And then all those draft picks that they got back, because they got rid of a lot to get James Harden, and that was a failed experiment. So now they get some of those first-round picks back from Dallas from Phoenix. And here's the thing with Phoenix, they're now put on the clock because Chris Paul is aging. He's getting older and he's not getting any younger. Devin Booker is obviously their young star, and he's in his mid-20s, and he's going to be the face of the franchise for a while. But between Chris Paul and Kevin Durant, you got 2 to 3 years there. And if it doesn't work out, all of a sudden the Suns may fall off again. And those draft picks that the Brooklyn Nets have later on in 2026, 2027 and beyond, those may wind up being lottery picks if things don't work out for the Suns. So they did well for themselves given the situation, and getting rid of Kyrie was obviously the writing had been on the wall for that ever since the offseason and all the chatter at Summer League this past year of there potentially being moves of him going to Los Angeles and elsewhere. So it just seemed like the right time for them to make this kind of move, and they did, and we'll see how it plays out for them moving forward.
Yeah, and it's a great point. When you bring up injuries, Phil, and how injuries can literally happen just like that at the drop of the dime. Kevin Durant and his injury. We never want to risk injuries or anybody, always risk people's health. But Brett, the injury that Kevin Durant, do you think this would be a major setback for the Phoenix Suns going? Because like you just said, they're on a time frame, right? You got 1 or 2 years now with both CP and KD. The ankle injury for KD, who done had foot problems before when it comes to him and his Achilles in the past. Think he's going to put that much of a hamper? You think he'll be ready for the postseason to make that stretch run?
It's definitely a concern. Obviously, it's better news than they expected with him being reevaluated in 2 to 3 weeks and this not being too serious, but it is serious because ankle sprains, it takes time to heal. So if they bring him back too early and then they go into the postseason with him and he just steps funny, he's going to be done for the rest of the postseason with that ankle sprain. So it's just one of those things that you did not want to see if you're the Suns. And it's unfortunate because they're not going to have any chemistry going into the postseason. They're basically going to be banking on the fact that you're going to bring Kevin Durant back and have him play with these high IQ players and hope it works, which is fine because the Suns, in my opinion, when Kevin Durant's on the floor with Booker, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton, they're still going to be favorites next to the Golden State Warriors, assuming that they're at full strength in that Western Conference. So everybody's looking up to those two teams, and they're going to try to match up and give it their best shot against them. But obviously, it is certainly a concern for the Suns' championship efforts this season.
Yeah, and word on the street is that there's a new training video going around the Phoenix Suns organization when it comes to the ball boys and the towel boys, when it comes to wiping that court and making sure it's dry. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, is like you look at that trade, and once again, it's like they make it based off of a trajectory, so they give up all these young assets to say, nope, it's win now mode for us. And then if Durant is out, that's one of their 2 years, like blown, for that trade, so then you have to go in the long term. Was it worth it? Because if that next year it is a flop and Chris Paul retires, Kevin Durant wants out, or Devin Booker's like, okay, this is obviously a failed experiment. Now you don't have any of those young guys that were the young stars, and you gave up your draft capital, so it's one of those things that it becomes very, very dangerous when, you are giving up a lot for a one or two, like player team focus, which leads me to my next point. Were there any trades that you guys like internally really expected to happen? Like the team really wanted to move this player, and for some reason it did not happen, and now they're just like stuck with something that they were expecting or really hoping to move on from.
Yeah, so two things real quick before I answer that. Just going back
Yeah.
to Kevin Durant real quick.
Mhm.
With him being out, it's more than just losing one player in Kevin Durant. You're basically losing three because you gave up Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson to get him. So
Yep.
you're without that depth. And then the second thing is with him out, I'm going to be interested to see how they use TJ Warren because they really haven't played him much. TJ Warren, I still believe is healthy. I haven't heard anything other than that he is ready to play and he was playing with the Nets. So that'll be an interesting scenario there. To answer your question of guys that teams were targeting and they got the guy that they want, we could look no further than the New York Knicks. Really, about 2 days before they made that trade, they started zeroing in on Hart and talking to the Trailblazers about what it would take to get him. They obviously agreed on that deal, sending out Cam Reddish and the first round pick for him. So, I mean, to get Josh Hart, it was a really good pickup for the Knicks. He's a guy that I kind of label as a Swiss Army knife. He can do a little bit of everything, whether it's defensively on the ball, defensive rebounds, offensive rebounds, like we saw last night against the Kings. He was all over the glass. And then when they're allowing him to shoot the three, he's shown that he's more than capable of being a 40% three-point shooter from the corner. So he's done everything that the Knicks have wanted him to be. And he didn't want to talk about that win streak of, oh, they've won 9 straight since you joined. But I mean, he's made an impact and he had a direct correlation with that win streak for the Knicks.
Yeah, and just like you said, he's the regular guys who we could look towards as somebody that we could compare ourselves to, right? Because when it comes to Josh Hart, you said it. When he said about the winning streak, not wanting to talk about it because it was already happening before I got here. And on top of that, even though they lost to the Charlotte Hornets, and the first question the reporter asked him was, were you guys tired? Is that an excuse? Is that something that we can look at? And the first thing he said is like, tired? He's like, the people that wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and got to work 12-hour shifts, those are the guys that's tired. And when you have a player saying that, you're going to win the fan base over. You're going to win me over. I was one of those guys that used to have to wake up every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, take the bus to the hospital I was working at and wash the floors of the hospitals in the operating room, right? So we can relate to players like Josh Hart, especially when you can tell it comes from a very sincere place and it's not phony or fake.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like the Knicks fans was so divided. Like there was such a divide between Knicks fans on people that thought our trade deadline acquisition was a total like bust because we didn't get a star or we wasted a pick for a player, and then some that were completely on board. And I think Josh Hart has pretty much taken everybody and been like, okay, this was actually a good trade, because we've kind of gone the opposite direction of a lot of teams. Like we're in that transition period, the almost but not yet, Like we're not there yet, but we're getting the pieces along the way that we need for the time when we are actually ready to start competing for a chip. So I think Josh Hart is like that guy. So that was a win. Were there any trades that you guys knew internally that teams wanted to do that didn't? They weren't able to acquire what they really wanted, or they had a player that they really, really wanted to move and they were hoping to get off the books at trade deadline, and now that player is still there and they have to figure out how to work it out?
Yeah, so there was a lot of interest around the league in Raptors OG Anunoby. He was a player that
Hmm.
multiple teams were targeting, including the Knicks. I know that the Warriors had last minute interest in him. The Pelicans had interest. The Grizzlies had interest. So the Raptors asking price was really high. They were wanting around 2, 3 first round picks for him, some with protection, some unprotected, and they also want a first round swap. So it would have taken probably a good role player, a young player, and then we're talking 3 first round picks, which is something that a lot of teams weren't willing to give up for Anunoby at the time, especially given that he was injured. Fred VanVleet was another name that was coming up, and the Clippers were a team that was interested in trading for VanVleet. Again, the price was way too high. And then Kyle Lowry was a player that the Miami Heat were dangling out there and seeing
Hmm.
what the market was like. Obviously, though, teams weren't wanting to take on Lowry's contract unless they were getting draft compensation back from the
Hmm.
Heat. And
Hmm.
that's something that the Heat weren't really willing to offer simply because they don't have much draft assets.
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
like 1 or 2 draft picks that they can actually trade. And by then, they weren't valuable picks. So teams weren't willing to take on that contract, even though the Clippers were a team with internal interest in Lowry as well. So that's kind of where the trade deadline fell. It was the Kevin Durant stuff ultimately set the pace for what was to come after. And
Hmm.
then the whole Raptor situation of them not willing to give up any of their guys without those teams paying a significant price, that resulted in other teams looking elsewhere. So the Clippers, for example, when they couldn't get anyone from the Raptors, they went out and got Bones Highland. They went out and got Eric Gordon. They went out and got Mason Plumlee, some secondary talents that they had been targeting. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where things fell. The Knicks, they did feel out the market for Evan Fournier and Derrick Rose. There just wasn't a trade that developed that they liked in terms of value of getting stuff back that could either help them in the future or help them now. So they're now looking towards the offseason of, well, how can we upgrade this roster? And
Hmm.
Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier's contract will be 2 main talking points for that.
Hmm. Great point, because Derrick Rose, he has a team option at the end of the season that the Knicks can either waive him or pick that up and use that and dangle that
Correct.
as an expiring there. Same thing with Evan Fournier, who his last year on his contract is a team option, so they can literally waive him after next season or whatever. So that's a great point. But I want to segue over, because besides the New York Knicks being as one of those teams that a lot of people like to talk about, a team that also is a hot button is the LA Lakers, right? We understand LeBron is injured and stuff. We do have some Laker fans that tune in from time to time, but expectations for the Lakers now that LeBron has been injured, after they kind of revamped their roster, what do you think expectations should be for the Lakers, and could they make a run in the postseason?
Well, Darvin Ham said it following the All-Star break. The expectations are to still fight for that 6th seed, and even without LeBron, they still think that they're capable of getting there, given how close the West is. I think that they're only a game and a half out of
Mm,
being in that 6th seed right now. So they've looked good. They've won 7 of their last 10 games, I believe. Anthony Davis has been playing out of his mind. They're going to be getting D'Angelo Russell back their next game, I believe, and you have Dennis Schroeder stepping up as well in that backcourt without D'Angelo Russell. But the one thing for the Lakers is that they finally have depth, and that's something that they did not have earlier in the year. They had a bunch of guys who weren't necessarily 3-point shooters, didn't necessarily fit that mold of being key off the ball guys around LeBron and Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook earlier in the year. Now they have someone in D'Angelo Russell who can create space for himself and create space for others. They have Jared Vanderbilt, who's been a revelation for them on the defensive end of the floor, and he's been a secondary rebounder alongside Anthony Davis. They got Mo Bamba, but obviously he's going to be out for the rest of the regular season now with that ankle
mhm,
sprain. But they just have guys who can play off the ball, and that's the most important thing for the Lakers. And they got faster as well. That's the scary thing. When you look back to that 2020 championship team, they were not necessarily the best defensive team, but when they did get a stop, they pushed the ball in transition better than anyone else in the league. They're kind of going back to those roots, and you can see it now with Jared Vanderbilt and others being able to run in transition. And obviously Troy Brown stepping up big time these last few games with his 3-point shooting as well. So you look at where the Lakers are at, and if you're a fan of Los Angeles, you're definitely happy seeing how this team has played, and you're optimistic of their chances of not only making the play-in tournament at this rate, but potentially moving up to that 6th seed if teams like the Warriors, Mavericks, and Timberwolves continue to struggle.
mm. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, so That's the crazy thing about trade deadline is that like it can completely alter what you thought was going to happen in the beginning of the season. You know, like you look at teams and you're just like, this is not what I expected. You know, like every little thing can happen. You know, like, and that's the thing where I'm starting to go.
It's like Brett at the beginning of the season saying the Knicks were going to win 50 games, right, Brett?
It's all about like, to me, it's starting to look like we have to look at having depth, like because anything can change, and if you're not a team of depth, it can completely affect your trajectory. You know, like even with these few games that these few weeks that John Morant can be out. Luckily the Grizzlies have a lot of talent and they're still competing. They're still able to compete right now. To what caliber, we don't know, but like last night, they still put up great effort, so seeing teams that aren't just 1 to 3 men strong, but having full on people that can fit into those places is really, really important. So when I think of like what happened at the trade line, then I start to look at the off season, like trade deadline will also tell you a lot of like how far you still are from that realistically. Like as great as the Knicks have played since the trade deadline, like I see games like the last two and I'm like, okay, we are still missing a very valuable piece, because if Brunson goes down, it seems like the cards kind of fall apart. Like that deck of cards just kind of starts to crumble. So we need an actual person that is of that caliber that can put the team on his back if Brunson was out, and someone that can actually shoot a three, because we've proven that that's an issue for a lot of games. So what do you think realistically is something that the New York Knicks could target in the summer to actually take them from a good middle, like a good, 3 to 5 seed team, and get them to somewhere where it's like, okay, they're not going to guess if they're going to win the first and second round of the playoffs. They are for sure going to be able to, win in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. Like what kind of player do you think that the Knicks will target in the offseason realistically?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with the Knicks. They didn't make any significant moves at the trade deadline other than getting Josh Hart. They had the options to potentially move Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier. They did not. They have all those first round picks right now. And I look at the Knicks and I say to myself that they're in the best position to land a big name this coming offseason, or land secondary pieces that they can surround Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, RJ Barrett with. But the thing with Barrett is that his role hasn't necessarily increased this year. If anything, it's decreased with the arrival of Jalen Brunson. So now you ask yourself, after signing that mega deal, is he somebody that the team will ultimately look to move? Could you package RJ Barrett, Evan Fournier, and maybe 2 or 3 of those first round picks and go out and get a big name like somebody like Karl Anthony Towns? Like, what's his status right now? Obviously, he has that calf injury, hasn't played since late November with the Timberwolves, but there's been some talk in league circles that Towns could potentially be on the move in the coming years from Minnesota, especially after they traded D'Angelo Russell, who was good friends with him, and then especially after this whole Rudy Gobert situation. If that doesn't pan out, and I don't know if it will necessarily happen in the offseason of Towns wanting out, but we look at the trade deadline. If things still aren't going well for the Timberwolves next year, could Towns be that name that is potentially on the move? And we know his ties to the New Jersey, New York area, and potentially playing for the Knicks as well. So that's definitely a name to keep an eye on. And then you look at some secondary guys that could potentially become available. You have John Collins still, whose status is going to be uncertain heading into the offseason. You have the Raptors of what they're going to do with OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet. And then who knows? I mean, you could potentially pull off a sign and trade deal if you really wanted to, who that player could be. It's thin picking really in free agency of who could become available, but you got names like Chris Middleton if he declines his player option. You have Fred VanVleet, like we've talked about, Harrison Barnes from the Sacramento Kings. That wouldn't be necessarily a sign and trade, but that could be a potential good free agent pickup, a veteran guy that you can put on the wing, and you know what you're getting from him on both ends of the floor. So this free agency class, there's not really those big flashy names per se. Whereas in the past we saw like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving signing with the Brooklyn Nets. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case this year with stars being on the move. I think that's going to be more trade centric of you have these good secondary players who are available, and we'll see what the market looks like for them heading into the off season.
Yeah, and it looks like when it comes to the Knicks front office, it looks like they are operating with some level of competency, right? That's one thing that we could point to the past 20 years when it comes to the New York Knicks. Those two words don't belong in the same sentence, right? But when it comes to this front office, they didn't overtrade for Donovan Mitchell, right? Everybody had Donovan Mitchell coming to the Knicks, and yes, there's a lot of Knicks fans out there that looking back on it, they probably would have made that move and overtrade for Donovan Mitchell, right? But seeing that the front office, they called Danny Ainge's bluff, right? They called this bluff. It was playing chicken with him, and they actually won. They didn't overtrade because I don't know what this team will look like right now or where we would have done with Brunson, Mitchell, Randall, and just a bunch of mid-level veteran exceptions of guys that just want to be on the team just to be on the team, right? So where we are at right now, it's a good place. We have draft capital. We have young players. Like you said, Brett, we have expiring deals that we could tangle in front of teams. And it's going to come down to the front office and their capologists to use every rule in the book to try to improve this team via the offseason, whether that be a trade, like you said, a sign and trade, whether we go into the draft. This draft is supposed to be a deep draft. I'm not sure. It seems like it's more top heavy than anything, but you may be able to find a dime in the rough out there, right? You never know, because when you look at this team, the majority of players on this team were late first round picks, right? Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Mitchell Robinson was in the second round. Emmanuel Quickly was a late first round pick. Quentin Grimes was a late first round pick. So a lot of the players that are on this team are late first round picks, not maybe even second round picks. So you may be able to find that diamond in the rough, but I'm gonna throw it over to Phil. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, that's the one thing is when I look at the Donovan Mitchell trade, because I'm a huge Donovan Mitchell fan, and the idea of New York blood coming to New York and being able to be that star would be a beautiful story. However, it's all about timing to me. Like in the best case scenario, we would have gotten Donovan Mitchell, but still not had to give up the whole freaking, farm to get him. But that's not how it goes with Danny Ainge. Like, it's just not. Like, especially when it comes to the Knicks. We all know he has, a bitterness towards the New York Knicks ever since he was a player, and he's proven that he's going to have that chip when it comes to being a coach. It's just the way it is. And so when I look at like the opportunity to wait and see where we're at right now and see that we're only a few games behind them. We're only a few games behind Cleveland. So I have to go, would it have been as effective of a trade as what we all thought it was going to be in the summer if we did get Donovan Mitchell, but we never were able to keep Grimes? We had to give up Barrett. We weren't able to acquire Josh Hart in the trade deadline. Like, would we even be, any better than we currently are? Obviously, that's a huge question mark. Would him and Brunson have worked well together, or would it have been like, oil and water, and just like cause just like separation, like would it not work well? And so when I look at it, he's got what, an extra year after this year on his contract?
Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell has, I
2?
believe it's 3 or 4 years left on his contract. He just
3 or
signed that
4.
big extension.
Okay. So yeah, so he's there. He's doing well. Like we have to go and say, okay, if it doesn't work out there and it was supposed to work out where he comes to the Knicks, there will be other opportunities. There will be opportunities where we're able to say, okay, as much as we loved RJ, it didn't pan out. Now we can move some stuff and start building to then acquire Donovan later on. Like if after his career there, he doesn't want to stay in Cleveland, then we can figure it out. Like, but I think that that would have been a bad move. So I'm kind of glad with the moves that we made. And when I look, I know that there's some really good potential shooters that are going to be available in the offseason that aren't stars, but that could still be good acquisitions. I'm pretty sure Gary Trent Jr. is available after this year if he doesn't extend with the Rockets. I mean, with the Raptors. So what are your guys' thoughts on something like that? Getting a player that kind of has that grittiness and heart that we're starting to see from the second unit already, and being able to add someone that you can guarantee is going to shoot lights out from three.
I'll throw it over to Brett. I'll throw it over to Brett so he can answer that. I just wanted to give you the update. When it comes to Donovan Mitchell's contract, he has a player option after the 2024 to 2025 season. So you could say like 2 seasons guaranteed with the Cavs. If he wants to opt out, he could definitely opt out afterwards. But go ahead, Brett.
Plus the option of an extension from Cleveland, which would be a high possibility, assuming that things go well moving
especially
forward.
now with the CBA about to be expanded.
Right. Yeah. So to answer your question of what the Knicks could potentially look at, and a guy like Gary Trent, like that's certainly an option if they wanted to. It's just the Knicks have put themselves in a position where they can make any move that they really want to heading into the offseason. They just have so many options because they have those expiring contracts. They have young recent first round picks and Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly that they could deal if they wanted to. They have RJ Barrett and they got all those first round draft picks to play around with as well. So it's really whatever they want to do. In terms of free agency, they do have a high payroll heading into next year. I think it's sitting currently around 160 million, but they can get off of contracts like we mentioned. They can get off of Evan Fournier's deal by trading him. They can get rid of Derrick Rose with his team options. So right there, that's over 30 million, but you're still tied down to Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle having those in quotes max deals. You're still paying RJ Barrett a rookie max contract. And you're also going to have to extend Josh Hart heading into the offseason, which at this point seems very likely. So those are 4 guys right there that are going to equate to probably, we're probably talking just under 100 million, if not over 100 million in 4 contracts right there. So I don't necessarily know if going out and paying Gary Trent Jr. a 4-year $80 million deal or a 4-year $100 million deal is really an option. And if you do a sign and trade, that's just going to hard cap you and you're going to run into a lot of problems financially. So is it a possibility? Sure. But I think it's much more likely that they look to get off of contracts and unload assets in order to land another big name or a key secondary talent that can help them right away.
No, yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. Now, I want to shift gears just a little bit, Brett, and get your thought right now. When it comes to the postseason, right? Obviously, we understand the standings are what the standings are right now. Everything can literally change within the next 2 weeks, especially when it comes to like the playing in tournaments, how close those races are. But when you look at the landscape of the playoffs, is there a team that, could be a sleeper team for you or a dark horse who's going to surprise some people in the playoffs?
Yeah, so I was actually talking about this on this week's episode of my Fast Break podcast, which dropped today. And I talked about both conferences. In the East, I think that it's really a 2-man race between the Celtics and the Bucks right now. I feel like that those 2 teams are kind of destined to meet each other in the Eastern Conference Finals. But if there's one team that can really get in the Celtics' way, to me, I think it is the New York Knicks. And we've seen it this year that they've had their number. They beat them in 3 of 4 matchups, 3 straight matchups. And you could see in that double overtime game just last week, I believe it was, they really gave the Celtics everything that they had, and they didn't let up at all, whether they were trailing in that game or whether they were up X amount. So I think that grittiness that they've been playing with and that extra energy that they now have during the second half of the year, I think that makes them a dangerous team. Whether or not they can get out of the first round playing either Philly or playing Cleveland, that's another question. But if they play Cleveland and they get out of that series and then they draw the Celtics in their next round series, I mean, that could potentially be a 6 or 7 game series and the Knicks could give them everything they have. So I think that's one team to watch in the East. But again, everything depends on matchups and how things play out in these standings, because if they draw Philly in the first round and Philly's able to beat them, I mean, we might as well just pencil the Bucks and the Celtics into the Eastern Conference Finals, in my opinion. But you look at the West, it's wide open. It really depends on these injury situations, like we mentioned earlier, where you have Kevin Durant with his ankle, you have Luka Doncic with his thigh strain. How long is he going to be out now? And you have the Warriors with Andrew Wiggins. When will he potentially return? Because that's a big missing piece right now. Obviously, Wiggins isn't the end-all, be-all solution for them, but he shores up a ton of things defensively for them. He shores up a lot of things offensively for them, because we're talking about a guy who can average 20 points per game and was shooting a career high 41% or just above 40% from 3-point range. So you add that guy to your rotation on offense alongside Stephen Curry, alongside Klay Thompson, alongside Jordan Poole, their offense becomes a lot more fluid and they don't have the struggles and the turnover problems like they did in last night's game against the Memphis Grizzlies. And then defensively, they've given up back-to-back 130-point games to their opponents. Andrew Wiggins is an A-, solid A defender in this league. and he can guard those number one options, taking a lot of pressure off of Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, who are their other primary defenders. So it just changes the whole complexity for this team. We saw how valuable he was in the playoffs last year for the Warriors, and they wound up winning a championship simply because Andrew Wiggins was fantastic in the playoffs, both rebounding defensively and offensively. So getting him back is a big question mark at this point. They haven't put a time frame on when he could potentially be back. He's away for personal reasons and family matters. So the Warriors are still optimistic, though, that he can come back before the end of the season. Then you look at the Memphis Grizzlies, and they're dealing with everything with John Morant. I've heard that there's a scenario in which he may not return until the end of the regular season, and he may not return at all this year. It really depends on what the league finds with their investigation and whether or not he gets suspended by Adam Silver. So Grizzlies, if they don't have John Morant, you might as well pencil them out of the equation of the championship picture in the West.
Yeah.
Denver's obviously that top team that everybody's chasing. And then you even look at the play-in tournament. Right now, there's 4 teams that can all make noise in the Timberwolves, Mavericks, Lakers, and Pelicans. I mean, those aren't going to be 4 or 5 game sweeps against them. Those are teams that can fight in every single series against any of these teams that are up top. So the Western Conference playoffs are really wide open, and the injuries and who's available is really going to play a role in who ultimately makes the NBA Finals.
Yeah, definitely. Phil, if I just want to ask one more question. I'll throw it over to you, Phil, afterwards. But I just want to ask Brett, when it comes to like now with the Dallas Mavericks, you brought up Luka Doncic and how long, if he will lose or miss times and how long will it be? But when it comes to that whole situation, we understand the polarizing talent that Kyrie Irving is. Anytime he goes on an Instagram live or a Twitch live, it seems like the internet stops, like just to hear what he says. But this week, Kyrie Irving went on another rant when it comes to Twitch. What do you really make of this situation with Kyrie Irving and his disdain when it comes to the media? Because when it comes down to it, Brett, you're somebody that you just got a job to do when it comes down to it. You're just covering the media. You're not out there like trying to chase stories or chase scenarios. So what do you make of this whole situation between the rivalry and Kyrie and the media?
I think that the treatment he gets from everyone is just kind of really low. I don't see why Kyrie deserves to be treated differently than other players in this league. Yeah, he may have some outlandish opinions on certain things, and he may act a little different than other players, but he's a really good guy at heart, and he has the right intentions. And when he's on the court, I mean, we all see what Kyrie can do. He's one of the best guards in the league, maybe one of the best guards of all time in terms of his playmaking skills. So I think that there's a lot of people in the media, to be honest, that need to back off a little bit and just kind of let this guy live his life and stop asking him all these personal questions and creating false narratives around him, because your job is to simply cover him playing basketball. And all the extra stuff, maybe people will say, oh, well, you got to cover who the guys are and who the people are. In my personal opinion, I don't believe in that. I think that you should let these guys, their off the court lives, let them handle that. And if they want to bring it up, let them, but you shouldn't really do digging into that and try to frame them for somebody who they're not, because I feel like that's happened to Kyrie Irving more times than not.
That's a great one. Kyrie, you see, Brett's on your side, baby, right? If you need, have Brett interview you so that way you could get your message out to the people. All right, Phil, I'm done. Go ahead before my mic cuts off. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's crazy because that whole thing, it's as an outsider, that just watches the game,
it is
that
unfair
just
though. Yeah,
creates content, stuff like that. It's such a hard and crazy line to draw, like of celebrity / still a real person,
Right.
and where we're supposed to draw that line, because like it's weird. I've actually seen some people with the same kind of opinion when it comes to the John Morant thing, that are just like, mind your business, like let the man live his life. Like he didn't do it on the court. He didn't, do anything, like with the NBA attached to it, and then there's the people that are just like, but he is the face of the NBA. He is the face of, these Powerade, Nike, and stuff like that. And so like that is a fine, crazy line to figure out where is too much, like when are you starting to color outside of the lines, of what's okay as wanting to know about the person as opposed to the athlete, because like Ja's whole thing, it had nothing to do with basketball, but it still has an effect, so it's like it still has to. So does that get like really, really sticky, like trying to figure out like where is that line? Like, where do you walk it and where do you like tiptoe around it? Like, it's just kind of hard for me because I'm like, I have my opinions, but like, I don't know.
I guess to answer that the best I can, I guess it kind of comes down to what the narrative is that you're trying to go for, whether you're in the media or whether you're a show host or whatever the case may be. Are you sharing your opinion on it, or are you trying to get everybody on your side on a certain matter? And I think that that's kind of where a lot of these stories cause havoc and cause
Mhm.
problems. And
Yeah.
we recently saw with Rashawn Holmes, I believe that he's suing the Sacramento Bee for defamation for certain stuff that they wrote. And it's
Mhm.
like, these are regular people. Like you can't just go around talking about them a certain way when you don't have all the facts and you're just banking on something that someone said. Well, yeah, there may be truth to that. And what they said that like some of the stuff may be true and you can include it in your story, but there's always two sides to every story. And if you're just going one-sided, I mean, that's where you run into problems. And I think that's where we see a lot of this dysfunction between the media and some of these players like Kyrie Irving, and now seeing these mainstream media companies cover the John Morant situation. In my opinion, I think some of the coverage has been absolutely horrid. We're talking about a young man who's a father to a 3-year-old daughter, a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and he made a mistake in his life. So yeah, is it a big mistake? It is, but he's seeking the help. He's
Yeah.
taking time away from the team on his own. He did that before the team stepped in and
Mhm.
said that he needs to take time away. So he's getting the help that he needs. Hopefully he gets the proper care that he needs and comes back a better person and a better man, simply for outside of basketball and his life
Yeah.
there, for his family, for his daughter, and he can mature and learn from this lesson. But there's always going to be these people that will constantly bring this up 5, 6, 7 years from now, like, oh, well, John Morant had this gun situation. Well, who cares? Nobody got hurt, luckily, in this situation. He's going to
Mhm.
learn from it and he's going to move on and come back a better person and a better player. So I just think that there's a lot of stuff out there that I look at least, and I roll my eyes at, and I don't really view that as journalism, in my opinion. I think that journalism should be uplifting and it should be a mutual thing. But when you have stories like that you're constantly tearing a guy down, I mean, then people wonder why they give the media lip in some of these press conferences and they don't like to talk to some of them.
Mhm. I appreciate that, Breck. And didn't mean to put you on the spot and everything like that, but appreciate your comments when it comes to that, because when you look at it, journalistic integrity is lacking nowadays when it comes to certain issues or certain just covering sports in general. Because, like you said, these are people at the end of the day. One thing I try to tell the fans that watch the show, whether they're Knicks fans or Yankee fans, you could criticize the player, but there's just a certain line that you just do not cross, because when it comes down to it, they're human, they have a family, and it's just a sport when it comes down to it. It's just a kid's game at the end of the day. They just can't get paid millions of dollars to do it, right? But for me personally, I totally loved how you handled the situation, especially talking about the John Morant issue and the Kyrie issue. But let's segue it just a little bit more, right? Because one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you up here obviously was to talk post trade deadline, but also now that the brackets are started with the NCAA, has there been any college players that went up when it comes to the NBA draft board in your eyes, or any other people that you say they've opened my eyes this season so far?
Well, I've done just a very little draft coverage so
Mhm.
far. I'm not one of those draft junkies that's doing it
Mm, mm, mm.
24/7. Respect to those guys
Yeah,
because there's
yeah,
some
yeah.
great ones out there that do it. So basically, I've just had my toes wet in the water so far and
Mm,
kind of feeling out which guys am I going to be looking at a lot during this tournament. And once the tournament ends, that's when I'll start my big draft evaluation, when I start watching film on these guys and really start diving into who they are as players, their strengths and weaknesses and whatever. So to me, one guy that I've had my eyes on all season long, and there is off the court drama with him right now. We'll see how that plays out. But Brandon Miller from Alabama is an exceptional player in my mind. I think that whoever winds up getting him is getting, and I say this with a pause, a young Kevin Durant like player in terms of
mm,
his length, the abilities that he's shown defensively, the potential he's shown on that end of the court, and just his pure scoring knack. I mean, this guy's going to be a full package behind Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama.
mm,
I would assume with that number 3 pick. I mean, it's either going to be him or one of the Thompson twins or Thompson brothers from Overtime Elite there. So
mm.
I think that those 5 guys are all potential number 1 picks in my mind of being draft picks, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. March Madness is always a really fun time, and it's going to be interesting for sure. One more thing on that whole journalistic integrity thing, I always have to throw this out there because I think that it's the ultimate roll your eyes thing. All this stuff that we've been hearing about the MVP talk and people spewing just garbage about Nikola Jokic not being favorable of winning a third straight MVP and comparing him to Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki, where he has absolutely no connection with them other than one thing. I think that's just absolutely terrible. And I think that something needs to be done about it. And that it's just, really, honestly, it's just stupid to hear. I mean, to create an argument that Nikola Jokic is not deserving of a third MVP and saying that all the voters are just voting for him for one specific reason, it's just garbage. And I don't respect it at all. And there's a lot of people in this industry that feel the same, especially when it's coming from somebody that doesn't even have a vote for MVP. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know it's 11:45. I know, Brett, you have a hard stop at 11:45, but Brett, appreciate you for taking time out this morning. We'll love to kick it with you maybe at the end of the postseason if you do have time. Phil, last words for Brett before he dip out.
Yeah, Brett, we appreciate you, bro. Like you bring a different take. A lot of times we're talking with people that are Knicks fans, so that their mind is pretty set on the New York Knicks, and to be able to connect with someone who's kind of got just a broader look on the whole league, and seeing things that we may not, I think makes us better as Knicks fans, to be able to kind of see things. So we appreciate your input all the time. Can you just let people know where they can follow you? Because I want people to support you and support what you're doing as you've supported us.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Brett Siegel NBA. You can also find me on the Fast Break Podcast weekly. It's our weekly podcast I host for Fast Break on Fan Nation, and then the website Fast Break on Fan Nation under the Sports Illustrated umbrella. We have you covered with every single injury news that you would want to know. I got you covered with all the insider info on a weekly basis, and we have a lot of new content coming out with player interviews and player profiles as well. So we're working hard over there, and we got a lot of good content coming your way for the end of the season and heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, Brett, again, appreciate you guys. I'm going to pin the link in the chat right now, that way you can find Brett's article, the last one that he did. But again, Brett, thank you again for taking time out this morning. Catch you again, my guy.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Peace. And talking about March Madness and talking about the NBA draft and college players and stuff, it's a great way for us to plug the Knights of Degen and the draft. I mean, in the March Madness. So check it out real quick. The Degen brackets. I'm telling you guys, you do not want to miss this exciting experience. Download the Knights of Degen app. You could get it on iOS, and now it's available on Androids. So if you're one of those friends of ours that have a green bubble in the group chat that we have, now you could download the KOD Media Knights of Degen app. But Phil, we try to avoid it as much as we can, but we're going to have to talk about it, right? When it comes to our New York Knicks versus the Sacramento Kings, we lost 122 to 117. Phil, I want to know, what's your thoughts real quick, bro?
Honestly, bro, like I have been nonstop venting and sharing my opinions of these last two Knicks games since the Charlotte loss. So I recorded the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I'm just going to play that because I honestly do not have the energy anymore. I've been talking on Trippy's, spaces. I've been talking in, the post-game show with Smooth, and I'm just exhausted sharing my opinion. So I'm just going to let this little play. It's your boy Phil Porto of the Knicks Morning Brew. And this is typically where I would do an episode of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But with the road trip and going to bed last night really, really late and just feeling worn down from what I witnessed, I'm just going to let these highlights speak for themselves. These are the highlights that will show you exactly why I feel the way I do right now.
Let it rain! Rain dance! Rain dance! Raindrops! Old school! Time out. I'm burning. My lungs are burning.
24 for 90 over the last 2 games from the three-point line. Last night, we shot 50 three-pointers. 5-0. 50 three-pointers, and we only made 13 of them. If you're making all of your threes and you want to shoot 50 three-pointers, go for it. But when you're missing all your threes and you want to shoot 50 threes, stop. 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 Coach Tibbs, do something about this. Stop these guys. Coach them. We were 42.7% from in the paint. Why are we shooting three-pointers when we can't shoot three-pointers well right now? I do not understand it. That is it. That's my vent session. Do better. Do better.
One thing I got to say is, one, you always hit it right on the head when you do these good, the bad, the uglies. And the second thing I want to say is, that's a very nice Jets jersey, bro. Very nice Jets jersey. I know I'm a Giants fan. I know I give you and your brother griefs about being Jet fans, but you wear the colors very well.
I appreciate it. It's always painful, like Jigga has talked about, picking out your Jet jersey to wear because you just look at like the players that just did not succeed and you have to choose which one is like the least poison pill to wear. So that was a Darnold jersey, which is very sad because he was a failed quarterback. So we're hoping that Rodgers comes so we can have a non-fail quarterback, or Jackson. But anyway, moving on to the game. That is frustrating to me, bro. Like, that is how I felt watching the game. Like, 53 pointers? Who the frick do we think we are? We think we're Clay and Steph all of a sudden? Like, that we can just start shooting and chucking up threes and it doesn't really matter? Like, it's just insane. Like, if I'm doing something and I'm seeing that it's not working, why am I going to continue to do it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We lost by, what was it, 7? What did we lose by? 5? 5. We lost by 5 points last night, okay? And that's similar to what we lost against the Hornets. You know what would have made us win? If we actually didn't miss 40 three-pointers and we took a few in the paint shots that actually went in. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Or if we made some freaking free throws. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me how we lose these games and we're beating ourselves. We are completely beating ourselves. We should not have shot that many three-pointers. It should have been shut down, should have been timeouts, should have been some coach changes, but we saw none of that. We saw horrible shot after horrible shot after horrible shot. Then when Grimes starts to heat up, what happens? Grimes is out of the game. And all you see on Knicks Twitter is, where did Grimes go? Is Grimes okay? Why is Grimes not out there? He just had 9 points. Where's Grimes? Don't get it. Don't get it at all.
Yeah, same. I want to give a quick second, because it was hard for us to kind of do the roll call while we had Brett here. So I just want to do the roll call real quick before we continue. Shout out to our guy, Matt Caputo's in the chat.
Caputo!
Matthew Caputo, how are you doing? Salute. 3 capital S's. Delano Still Jr.'s in the building. My man, G-Ram de la Isla's in the building. G-Ram, what it do? Hope all is well. Mr. Chris Joseph, how are you doing? Hope all is well, my guy, Mike Geisers. Who else we got in the chat right now? JJ is in the building. JJ, how you doing? Benji Kleiner, who was here the other day. Our guy Benji was in the chat. Benji, how you doing? TC still was in the building. My guy TC, hope all is well. We had G Money in the building. You know G Money, the young encyclopedia, our guy, Pots and Pans. Mr. Krista Flash was in the building. How you doing? Pudge Nice was in the building. All right, we had a lot of Knicks fans that were in the building. Who else we got here? Let me see who else. Jonathan. I can't forget my guy Jonathan, who says me. How you doing, Jonathan? But yeah, bro, when it comes down to this last game, Sacramento King versus the New York Knicks, halftime, we was down double digits, right? We love to see this fight. We love the fact that we fought back, but we shouldn't have been put in that position to be down 21 points and have to claw our way back and fight back on the road. Like my man G Ram said, hopefully we can get back on track, or we will continue to decline in the Eastern Conference standards. Absolutely. Losing these last 2 games in a row, and I said it on the last show, bro, losing these last 2 games in a row literally undoes it undoes all the good that came from the 9-game winning streak. Just losing these 2 games in a row, it undoes all that good stuff that came from before. Shout out to Cam from the Kickback, our guy Cam in the building. He said, salute, Morning Brew crew. Tough loss, but we are still playoff bound. Hopefully. Lamel, LOL. Let's go Knicks. 100%. Go ahead, bro.
So let's talk about that point. The hopefully. Like, that's the scary part, is now that we have to put a hopefully at the end of it. Because to me, there shouldn't be a hopefully. You know, like, a lot of people think that I was upset that we lost to the Hornets because it was the Hornets. I don't care that we lost to the Hornets. I care the reason that we lost to the Hornets. And the reason we lost to the Hornets is that our guys were exhausted. And instead of making proper adjustments to take care of our guys, we pushed them to their limit. We pushed them past their limit, and they weren't even able to perform against a tanking Charlotte team. And the reason why was because they had no legs under them. All of their shots were hitting the front of the rim. You saw it. You saw how gassed our guys were. And then what happens? We push them anyway, then go on this massive road trip, and they're still gassed because their bodies have not recovered. They have to travel for almost 7 hours, plus car rides there and back. And then they have to compete against the team who is competing for the 2nd spot in the West. That's where we needed to rest some of our guys, give them some chill. There was a lot of debate. A lot of people were like, I can't believe you would want to rest our main guys, even if it's against Charlotte. And then after yesterday, some of those people were like, now I see we probably need to rest our guys. So if we rest our guys now, when we need them most, it's going to cause an issue for us in playoff position of where we end the season if we rest some of these guys. But last night shows that they need rest. Last night shows that this whole idea of we play hard all the time is what put Jalen Brunson back into the game and potentially ruined him even more because he looked even more in pain and has to get reevaluated now. So these kind of decisions of not taking care of our guys, even though we're seeing it with our own eyes, what this exhaustion has done to them is something that I have to give an L to the coach and to anyone who's making those decisions, because this is not a time for us to be exhausted, and we're exhausted because we couldn't chill out against that Charlotte game that really meant nothing. Now when it means something, we don't even know if Jalen Brunson's going to be around these next few games. He needs to rest. He needs to. Julius Randle obviously needs rest, and that's an issue. You know, like without Jalen Brunson, there's a lot that comes down. You saw, we all got hype at that Celtics game where Randle made that 3-pointer, you know, and won the game, you know, pretty much. You know, it was, oh, Randle. But let's be honest, as all of us saw Randle dribbling and almost losing the ball, before he made that 3, all of our minds went to the same thing. Why is Randle dribbling the ball? He's almost going to give it up. You know, he almost cost a turnover to lose the game. We saw that not go our way last night. We saw Randle, when it was important, dribbling and getting it stolen in the same way. Even to the point that the announcers were like, yeah, he got lucky last time against Boston where he was able to regain his composure after they poked the ball away, but this time he wasn't so lucky. So we can't see Randle revert to things like that in Brunson's absence. He needs to trust someone else just as much. So the LOL hopefully thing is kind of funny, but it's also so true. We need to figure out what we're going to do if if Brunson is not there and Randle is exhausted. How does this team still win?
Shout out to our guy Francisco Carrillo in the building. Francisco, hope all is well. I got a little stat I want to throw out there to you and to everybody who's watching right now. When it comes to ISO scoring in the NBA, when it comes to isolation points, off the top of your head, Mr. Phil Porto, who do you think is leading the NBA in points per possession when it comes to ISO scoring?
Jalen Brunson.
Absolutely. Jalen Brunson is leading the entire NBA. Second is DeMar DeRozan. Third is Damian Lillard. Fourth is Donovan Mitchell. And fifth is James Harden. So when it comes to ISO scoring, Jalen Brunson is the guy that is leading the entire NBA. And I bring that up to say this. Last night, what were we missing in that fourth quarter? We were missing somebody who can control the game, slow the game down, and score when we need to score. Not having Jalen Brunson tremendously had hurt us, not only in last night's game, but in Charlotte's game as well. I know that's a game that we should have won, but not having our leader, not having our best player on the court hurts us a lot. Now, this is according to Stephen Bondi, and this is all from Stephen Bondi from the New York Daily News. When it comes to Jalen Brunson and his injury, it's not a good sign for a player to miss 2 games and just a half of a game before he's removed with a sore foot. The same injury that had him sidelined that had him on the status report for 6 straight days. So when it comes down to it, if you were going to take Jalen Brunson out in the second half, why did you even allow him to play in the first half? If he wasn't 100% ready to go, why even risk that kind of an injury? I understand it. I definitely do. You lost against Charlotte. You want to switch up this momentum. Tom Thibodeau and the coaching staff, they probably went to Jalen Brunson and asked him, how are you feeling? And he probably said, I'm ready to go. They trusted in their player. But this is what happens. This is what we don't need. We don't need now this foot injury to be bothering Jalen Brunson and be lingering with Jalen Brunson over the next couple of weeks. We don't know when he's going to return, and it could literally spiral out of control over these next couple of weeks if we don't start getting things together in his absence, Phil. So one thing I want the New York Knicks to do is go into the film room, right, and just watch film when it comes to Jalen Brunson and when it comes to him in the fourth quarter and his game time decisions, because what are you doing and what you have been doing in these last couple of games does not cut it. And on top of it, Tom Thibodeau, I'm going to need you to start wanting these players to start knocking down some free throws. 64% from the free throw line last night was horrible. We missed 13 free throws and we lost by 5 points. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah. You know, there's so many things that the last 2 games showed me, you know, like you were saying, even if Jalen Brunson said, I'm good, put me in, they knew that he wasn't 100%. Like, they knew, you know, like you don't bounce back that quickly and not say my guy's going to play 100% of the game. Like, if you're only putting him for 50% of the game, it's because you know he's not 100%. And so my whole thing is, I don't care what my children say. If they tell me they're okay and I know that they're not, I'm stepping in because I'm ultimately the one that has to take care of this household. Like, I need to make the best decision for my household. Our coach needs to make the best decision for our organization and our players. And here's the bad thing. Don't play coach when you want to play coach and then not play coach when you need to play coach, because that was a coach decision that needed to happen. But when players do things that he doesn't necessarily want, even if it's effective, he wants to play coach and pull them out or do this or do that. And so a lot of it came down to the coaching last night. Like, Grimes is the reason we kind of got back into the game in the fourth quarter. And then all of a sudden, Grimes was gone. No one knew where Grimes was. Randall's now running the point forward when Grimes was doing a great job facilitating and getting open and draining shots and driving to the basket. Yet Grimes sat for way more time than he needed to. And look at the offensive rebounds. What the heck? Like, I don't remember who gave the stat, but it was a reporter talking about how they've never, ever seen in NBA history someone kill it and have the winning hand by that big of a margin when it comes to rebounds and still lose the game because all of our offensive rebounds, there were times where we got 4 or 5 offensive rebounds in one play. But instead of doing something with it, we shucked up threes again and continued to build on that house of bricks that we were tossing up.
Yes.
4
Yes.
threes in one possession that weren't going in, and no one was able to say, timeout, drive the freaking ball. Like, I do not get it. It was really, really poorly coached. And I've given Tibbs my, respect for the things that he has done that have been successful. But when people preach this, Tibbs deserves to be in the conversation for Coach of the Year, that's when I have to say, stop it. Like, stop it. Look at
not
game
this year.
and look at the coach that he was going up against and how consistent he's been all year. You want to talk about a coach that deserves to be candidate for Coach of the Year? It's the guy who beat us last night.
Mike Brown.
So, yeah. Straight up.
100%.
So,
Credit that last night's game, it came down to, and I apologize for cutting you off, Phil. I wasn't sure if you're done. You finished? All right, cool. Last night's game, it came down to, like you said, Phil, coaching. It came down to which coaches was better on the sideline. And when you look at adjustments, Mike Brown made every adjustments he had to make. When Sabonis was in foul trouble, he made adjustments. In the beginning of the game, he made adjustments. If you want to point to one thing that may have had you scratching your head when it comes to Mike Brown is that fourth quarter and challenging that play and he was only left with one timeout with 6 minutes left to go. Even with being only left with one timeout with 6 minutes left to go, he was able to still coach his team so they can close out the game at home. And that's what we were mixing yesterday. There was no reason why, if you have Quentin Grimes, who was going off, he was the only one that was really going off from beyond the arc, even though he was 4 of 10 from beyond the arc. He was the only one that was going off. Why are you putting Emmanuel Quickly back in the game when Emmanuel Quickly was 1 for 11 from the field, 1 of 8 from beyond the arc? If you want to keep Quickly in the game because he has the speed to guard De'Aaron Fox, then take RJ out the game. Or go with the small lineup like you did before. Put Randall at the center position and put RJ at the power forward position. But besides all of that, I said all of that just to say this one thing. That game last night, it came down to, was Julius Randle going to step up and be that scorer and that person that we need, especially in the absence of Jalen Brunson? And he didn't answer the call. And I know deep down he wanted to have a big game because who was he going against? Sabonis. Sabonis is a player that ever since he's been on the Knicks has kind of been his rival in the NBA. That's the guy that him and Sabonis, they have this little feud going back and forth, and he didn't show up against Sabonis. What did Sabonis do? Sabonis had a triple-double and showed up and showed out against Julius Randle.
Yeah, what's crazy, bro, is the other day, one of the clips that I cut of our episode was where you were talking about giving Julius Randle his flowers. Okay.
Which we do when he deserves it.
When he deserves it. What I need Julius Randle to recognize is that you can't hold our flowers in your hands and dribble the ball at the same time. You just can't. Like, you are not good at dribbling the ball and holding the flowers at the same time. Where you try to dribble, you have to give up the flowers because you are very, very bad at it. You can't multitask those two. I can't give you my flowers and watch you dribble the basketball. Like, I just cannot do it. That cost us a lot last night. And to your point about the Grimes thing, people are like, oh, you can't really give Grimes the credit because, he was, I think you said, what was he? What for 10?
He was 4 of 10 from the 3-point line.
Okay.
He was 7 of 13 from the field, though, collectively.
Okay. So with those stats, he was 4 for 10 from the 3-point line, but he was 4 for 7 from 3-point line after he had that stretch of what we're talking about where he was on fire. 4 of 7, and 3 of them were consecutive. So he was starting to heat up when Tibbs decides, I'm going to put in Emmanuel Quickly, who has been absolutely trash from everywhere tonight, and I'm going to sub the 1 for 8 player in and take out the guy who just hit 3 threes and 2 in the paint and caused a few assists in the last 4 minutes of gameplay. So it's a coaching thing.
Like Bud
You know,
said,
like
Tibbs allowed it.
yeah,
He
allowed it.
allowed that to go on. He allowed that to go on. Last night, I'm not sure if Tibbs was just jet lagged, but he didn't prepare his players. We were down double digits by the time halftime was here. We were, excited because they were clawing, coming back, but you were down 21 points. There should have been no reason you was down 21 points. I know you don't got Jalen Brunson. I understand that, but at least have some effort. At least have some effort. If it wasn't for our rebounding, our offensive rebounding, look, I'm looking right. Josh Hart had 15 rebounds. Isaiah Hartenstein had 9 rebounds. Mitchell Robinson, he had 8 rebounds. And why was Mitchell Robinson out of the game for like basically the entire fourth quarter? Did you see Mitchell Robinson check into the game in that fourth quarter? Was Mitchell? I don't think Mitchell Robinson was the reason we were down double digits. Honestly, I don't think Mitchell Robinson was the reason we were down by 21 points. Do you think, Phil? Was Mitchell Robinson the reason we weren't scoring?
If you look, Mitchell Robinson was 4 for 6 from the field. You know,
Crazy.
you had guys that were like 9 for 22 or 1 for 11. Like it doesn't make any sense that someone who was at least being a little bit productive spent less time on the court than people that were not being effective at all. Like it just really doesn't make sense. I'm gonna pause real quick. I'm posting, if you guys could like and subscribe to the new channel at the Morning Brew Sports.
Mm-hmm.
We would love to continue to have you guys follow what we're doing there.
Yes.
I do have to say, we did promote. It is Open Panel Friday. Hector and I can keep on going with the conversation. But if you are someone that is currently in the chat and you're like, I actually would love to be in the open panel, then
give us
let
a
us
thumbs
know.
up.
Give us a thumbs up and we will post that link so you guys can come up and be part of the conversation. But we're not going to force anything if you guys are just content with listening and hanging out right now. So just let us know in the comments if you would want to be on the open panel and we'll throw that link in. Just let us know. So back to the conversation, when it comes to
going forward, I apologize. Going forward, starting next week, all of our content will be exclusively on the Morning Brew Sports. Right now, we're streaming simultaneously on the Knights of Degen channel and the Morning Brew Sports. But starting next week, it will be exclusively the Morning Brew Sports and the Morning Brew Sports going forward for both the Yankees Morning Brew, the Knicks Morning Brew, and for Eddie and Smitty exclusively. My man G Ram said he's shy. G Ram, you aren't shy, bro. Stop lying, my guy.
You know what's crazy to me, bro, is
What's up?
Besides the one Josh Hart thing where he threw away that pass on the inbound, I look at his stats and he was pretty much flawless. Like 3 for 4 from the field.
TC, you can come on. You can come on to all of our open panels. TC, he said, "I'm exclusive Yankee Morning Brew panel only. Got to talk to my agent."
2 for 2 from free throw. 15 freaking rebounds. He was our biggest rebounder last night. 7 assists and 3 steals. Why did this guy not get more shooting opportunities? Like that, I don't understand. He is the only guy that had amazing shooting percentage last night, and he was the one who shot the least. He was 75% from the field and 1 for 1 from 3. This is where I don't understand how we don't pivot. Like, why was there not timeouts and saying, hey, we are going to go through Josh Hart right now because he is our best scoring option right now. We're going to run plays for Josh Hart. Why do we not do that? Why do we not make any changes?
Common sense is not common, Phil, when it comes to our team, when it comes to our coaching staff, right? So the Knicks, they fall to the Kings. We drop 2 in a row. RJ Barrett. This is the one thing. Fans are ripping RJ Barrett, and I understand it. Like Brett said a little while ago, people were expecting RJ Barrett to make that leap this year. It's literally probably playing at the same level, if not a little bit worse than what he was last year. RJ definitely has to step it up. He has to be more consistent. But guys, just like last year, right? When you had fans hating on Julius Randle just for the sake of hating on Julius Randle. Stop it. It looks sad that you're literally just going out of your way to just hate on RJ Barrett. The amount of group text that I am in that everyone, anytime RJ does something, literally starts talking about RJ. It's annoying. It gives me migraines. I muted all of them because it's getting out of control. Yes, do we want RJ Barrett to be more consistent? Absolutely. Yes, are there things that RJ Barrett should clean up in his game? Absolutely. But to go out of your way to criticize this young kid who's only 22 years old, you are you really even a fan? Are you even a fan? Like honestly, at this point, are you just here to watch this team lose and just root against RJ Barrett, just like people were rooting against Julius Randle last year? I don't know. It's getting out of control, in my opinion. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and here's the thing: is give RJ the crap you want to give him when he deserves it. But don't be one of those people that's going to talk so much crap when RJ plays bad and not even say a single thing when he plays well. Like, it's so easy for you to like Twitter finger how bad RJ is when he has a bad night, but when he has a good night, you're not saying anything. You know, like be someone who's a fan that's willing to call it as you see it, both good and bad. You know, like stop being so pro somebody else that you can't give respect to a different player. Like it's not an either or. Like it's not like dating. You can have more than one player that you like. You know, this is crazy. So my thing is the ones that are constantly talking trash about RJ are the ones that will never celebrate RJ, and that's an issue. I'm going to celebrate any player that does well, and I am going to come down on any player that talks crap. I went on my rant the other day about how Emmanuel Quickley needs to be sixth man of the year, and that like it is a blessing from God that Emmanuel Quickley is a Knick. And yet yesterday I was like, what the heck? Get this guy off my freaking court. I do not want to see Emmanuel Quickley shoot another shot. Doesn't mean I don't like Emmanuel Quickley, just means I did not like Emmanuel Quickley last night. I did not like his game. You know, so the Hives are crazy, man. They buzz when they want to buzz, you know, and it's a little toxic. And it's crazy because like it's you have people from all over the place, even positive Knicks fans that will choose, you know, their player and they'll latch onto that player or that person, and you can't see anything but that person. It's weird. It's like beer goggles.
Yeah, but like my guy New York Rican in the chat, my man G-Man, he said, I like RJ, right? But some Knicks fans have too much high hopes for him. He may be just an up and player for the rest of his career. When it comes to RJ Barrett, brother, right? I don't think RJ Barrett is going to be a transcending superstar in this league. I don't think any, and if anybody has those expectations, you need to lower those expectations. Maybe expectations they have are because of where he was drafted in the draft. But when you do that draft over, right? And if you if you try to rethink about that draft, Zion went number one. He's injured. John Moran is going through what he's going through. Brett Siegel was talking about he may miss the entire season because of the NBA, and we don't even know what ramifications this is going to leak into next season, right? So when it comes to RJ Barrett at that 3 spot, you can sit pretty and say like, okay, we got a solid player at number 3 that has no baggage, no injury history or whatever. Now, if you want to say you would redraft certain players and you would have rather have Jordan Poole over RJ Barrett, that's a great point to have because Jordan Poole is a stud, is a star, right? He is a baby star on the Golden State Warriors, won a championship. You can have that argument. Darius Garland was already an all-star with the Cleveland Cavaliers. You can have that argument and say, well, you would rather have Darius Garland over RJ Barrett. But for people to go out of their way and try to bash him, that's where you lose me. Right. That's when you lose me in the conversations. Right. But like I said, just a little bit more consistency, understanding that he's not and recognize that he's not going to be a star. Right. Lower your expectations. And as a team, when it comes to team basketball, that's what we have. We have a bunch of scrappy players that all play for each other. Yes. Are we missing our leader on the court when it comes to Jalen Brunson? Absolutely. Because in these last 2 games, the game against Charlotte, where he had that moment of arguing back and forth with the referee, and last night arguing back and forth with the referee, those were the moments when Jalen Brunson was on the court that he'll pull Julius Randle to the side, or he'll come up to Julius Randle like, listen, you got to slow it down. You know what I mean? Tone it down just a little bit. But what's your thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah. So what people need to realize is your expectations and what the Knicks front office expectations are obviously different. Like when the Grizzlies brought in John Morant, they brought him in to try and make him a star. They built a team around him. They put him as the centerpiece. Didn't work so well with the Pelicans for Zion, but their goal was to bring him in as a star and build around him. Everything started to happen around Zion. Everything started to happen around John Morant. That is not how the New York Knicks did it. This was Randall's team. Like, it is Randall's team. They've built around Randall. Now they're building around Brunson. We have never, as an organization, put our focus and attention on making RJ Barrett the star. So the fans that are still expecting and having expectations for him to be this star, those are expectations you've put on him. Like, not that our organization has put on him. And when you look at his stats, yes, he's had some pretty freaking rough ups and downs in this season. But the guy is still averaging 19.8 points a game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 43% from the field. And guess what? In that 19.8, like, you have to look. There are 450 players, if you say 15 per team, like for all the teams, 450 players in the NBA right now playing, and he is 45th in points per game. So he's not a waste or trash like some people say, but he's not top 20 like some people want him to be.
Yes.
But he's still doing more than like the other 400
rest of the
players
people
in the league, you know?
Yeah.
So we got to look at facts and not just emotions of how we feel about the player and what our expectations for that player was. You know, like, let the player be what he is. If he's on our team, support him through the ups and downs, call it out when you see it, but be willing to see it with like full facts, not just your full emotion.
Is he better than Kevin Knox?
Yep.
Is he better than Frank Ntilikina?
Yep.
Is he better than Jordan Hill?
Yep.
Is he better than Kristaps Porzingis, your favorite Knick of all time?
Nope. Not even close.
just joking. But guys, you know, Phil, you hit it right on the head, right? You know, and I think this is something that you and I, we could both agree on. But let's just pull this up real quick, because when it comes to the standings right now, we are 39-29. We still have a lead against the Brooklyn Nets, a 2-game lead when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets. We are 3 games behind the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then you got the Sixers, the Celtics, and the Bucks, right? When it comes to the playoff standings right now, I am happy we are at the moment. Like you said, we have some stuff that we need to clean up before the season ends. What's your expectations? What's your keys? What does the team have to clean up, especially before our next game, which comes, I think, if not they don't have a game tonight. It's tomorrow they have a game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Honestly, I think a lot depends on if we see Jalen in the next few games or not. Because if not, we got to figure something out. And I have not lost hope in the players, but I do, like I always have, I don't have a ton of faith on the coaching staff to make adjustments, because what they've done has been working, but now with Jalen gone and the exhaustion, we need to make changes. I'm not sure that we can make those changes. So I don't really know. I don't know what to expect against these next 2 games in California. We need to at least split this. We need to. Like, if we go on a 4-game losing streak while Brooklyn is still competing, they can surpass us. And we cannot let that happen. Like, we cannot let that happen. We cannot slip to the 6th seed. Our best chance to make it into the second round of the playoffs is to stay in the 4th, 5th seed. And so I don't really know what to expect these next 2 games. One thing I know is that the 2 things that need to change if we are going to win is our 3-point shooting. Either we tone it down and don't shoot as many, or we figure it out and start hitting some. And we need to start hitting some free throws. Way too many free points left on the table. If you look at our free throws, if we would have made our free throws in those last 2 games, the 5-point differential on both games wouldn't have been a factor. We still would have won those games, even with how trash we played. Even with how trash we
Mhm.
played, we would have won if we hit our free throws.
100%. We got a 4:00 game tomorrow against the Clippers. We are back again Sundays for a back-to-back against the Lakers at 9 p.m. Then we come back to the Trailblazers Tuesday at 10 p.m. And then we circle back to Madison Square Garden with the Denver Nuggets Saturday at 1 p.m. So it seems like next week we only have 2 games all of next week. So hopefully that's some time for Jalen Brunson to rest more and some of our players to rest more before we go on a deep stretch where we got Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, literally 3 or 4 games in 1 week. So we're going to have to rest our guys. Like Phil said, we're going to have to also be able to knock the free throws out. You got to start doing the little things that help you win the game. The stuff that doesn't show up in a box score, you gotta be able to not turn over and protect the ball. You know, one thing about the Knicks last night, or just one thing about the Knicks in general, since Tom Thibodeau made that switch to the 9-man rotation, we've been good when it comes to not turning the ball over, right? I think we are 27th in the league when it comes to turning over the ball, which is like in the bottom 5 of teams that turn the ball over. So when it comes to that aspect, we are pretty good. Last night in that fourth quarter, what we had like 7 or 8 turnovers in the fourth quarter alone. That one play that Josh Hart had, just the miscommunication between him and Randall. I really don't put that on Josh Hart because Josh Hart has been silent since he got here. That's a little blemish right there that if you want to point that out, you can point that out and be that type of guy. But when it comes down to it, we got to be better when it comes to taking care of the ball and not turning it over. Because if you turn the ball over, especially anywhere from 5 to 7 times in the fourth quarter, trying to come back after we clawed back from a 21-point deficit, 99% of the times you're not going to win those games.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna look up. I'm gonna give props to Cam here. Talking about letting Brunson and Randall rest. I know people are so anti the idea of Randall resting, but look what happens when you bank so much on being able to say our players don't take games off. Like, yes, load management can be a load of crap, but after some of these games, these guys' bodies need it. If we would have given Randall and Quick the rest they deserved after that Boston game, these last 2 games would have been different. I bank on that. I would put money down on that. If we could see what those 2 players would have been like rested last night, I think it would have been a completely different game if they were rested in that Charlotte game. And so I would rather have a Randall that gets rest come in than a drained Randall and Quick to continue to play the way that they played these last 2 games. And so I would say if Tibbs isn't going to say, yeah, I'm going to sit these guys, at least look in the first and second quarter. And if you're able to see that their bodies are still exhausted and they're playing like trash, just call it. If we're going to take an L anyway, take an L using our reserves and let our guys rest those last 2 quarters. Like, do not force something that does not need to be forced. Because if we're going to lose on this road trip, lose on the road trip, come back strong with rested guys.
Yeah, and I think we could put that conversation to rest when it comes to the Knicks. Francisco said it better. He said, tired players make bad decisions at time. And you can't argue against that. Like, if you're tired, if your legs feel like jello, you're not in the game 100% mentally. You're checking out of the game. So, yeah, like Francisco said, when you're tired, you make bad decisions. But there's one thing we got to touch on, Knicks fans, before we dip out of here. It has nothing to do with the current day Knicks as of now, but an alumni of the New York Knicks when it comes to Patrick Ewing being let go from Georgetown. He's out as the coach of Georgetown. What do you make of this, Phil?
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, you have to, I think it was 6 seasons, that have kind of been on a decline with him as the coach, and so sometimes it just doesn't work. Like, we've seen good coaches struggle somewhere and then go somewhere else and do well, so it doesn't necessarily mean he was a bad coach. We've never heard anything, where people are like, playing for Patrick Ewing is, horrible. But maybe it just wasn't working anymore, and so an organization being able to say something doesn't work anymore, we have to look out for the best of our team, is a good thing, in my opinion, regardless of who that coach is. And so I kind of wish that, maybe we start to see some of that if we, still see bad coaching moving forward, that our organization can do the same thing. Like, yep, we had Tibbs do some great things, but moving forward, we need something else. Maybe Tibbs will surprise me and things will change. I don't know. But as far as Patrick Ewing, I'm a fan of Pat. I wish him the best, whether it's him retiring and being able to kind of just chill, or him finding another team to coach, or like Cam said, bring him as an assistant coach. Like, you want to help our big guys know how to be a little more agile on your feet and be able to like still contend without fouling. Who better than number 33, from the New York Knicks? Bring them in, help them to coach our big guys, help them to get some of that grittiness into our big guys, and we'll see what happens. But I wish Pat the best.
Mm-hmm. And like Cam from the Kickback said, bring Pat to NY to be an assistant coach. I would not be opposed to that whatsoever. That's something that I wanted to see ever since I was a kid in high school after Patrick Ewing retired. I was waiting for Patrick Ewing to come back, especially hearing that he's going to start coaching and he wants to start coaching. When he was an assistant for the Orlando Magic, I was wondering, what are we doing? What are we doing as an organization? Why don't we have this man sitting on our bench? And people may call me a conspiracy theorist, whatever. I do carry some aluminum foil I like to wrap around my head, but for some reason, it rubs me the wrong way that Patrick Ewing wasn't there for the 50th anniversary of the last time the New York Knicks won a championship. Yes, he videoed into it, but Patrick Ewing, he's hardly there at Madison Square Garden when it comes to Knicks events. I'm not sure if there's an issue between Patrick Ewing and the Dolan family, or just James Dolan himself. Once James Dolan took control of the New York Knicks, that's when the New York Knicks traded Patrick Ewing. So I'm not sure if there's any animosity left over from that. But guys, for me, as a Knicks fan looking into the situation, it doesn't seem like they're friends. It doesn't seem like there's any good blood in that situation. It looks like there's more bad blood of anything. But I digress. I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Phil, my brother, any last words before we dip out and just enjoy the rest of this beautiful day?
No, man, just thank you once again to everybody that has joined us on this journey so far. We recently, I created a reel just of like what things have been like for us thus far in this first season of Knicks Morning Brew. And just looking back on all the episodes and all the people that were like part of it, all the people that were in our open panel, all the people that were in our chats, all the guests that were part of it, like it seriously is a humbling and really cool experience to be able to look back on all that. So check out that reel and kind of just see what we've been going through. And those that just got on the journey, thank you guys so much. Big things still coming. If you didn't watch because the game was live last night, watch the Smitty and Eddie show. Last night, they were on fire. They had a new segment roll out, and it could have been one of my favorite segments. So go to our channel, watch last night's episode of the Smitty and Eddie show. And once again, just thank you guys. Hope you guys all have a blessed weekend. Enjoy it. Enjoy your Friday night out. Take your boo out for Friday night. And yeah, just chill and catch some Yankees Morning Brew.
I forgot something. Phil, the other episode on Wednesday, it was our 50th episode as well. We forgot to say anything about it being so this is our 51st episode of the Knicks Morning Brew. Philip, how you doing, bro? 51 in the books, baby.
That's crazy.
Hey, there's Jiggaman. Back for the 51. 51, bros. Honestly, it literally just went by like that. It's been awesome doing this show with you guys, Phil. I say it all the time. You and your brother, you guys are like my lost brother that I never knew. And it's been awesome doing the show with you guys. It's been awesome dealing with the chat, interacting with the chat, growing this new channel as well. Philip, I love you, my guy.
I love you, brother. I appreciate you guys. Like it's been a blessing. Like I'm so thankful to be part of this journey with you guys, and it's just going to continue to go up from here. So thank you all for the support, and until Monday, we out.
Yeah. No get yanked today. Just to let everybody know, no get yanked today. Pete Simonetti is under the weather, so we're taking a break. There won't be any get yanked coming on later on tonight over on NYY News TV. So enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. Pete Simonetti, feel better, my guy. Philip, like always, deuces.